I'm your host, Brandy Fleck, and this is Human Amplified. We're on a mission to revamp society by amplifying your humanity. This week on the show,
my name is Nathan Peck. I am a patient and actually the CEO of Cure VCP disease. I want to enjoy my independence. I do know what the future looks like. You're thinking every day, is this my last day that I'm going to be able to stand up getting out of bed? It messes with you. The patient population was not organized. The scientific community was not really organized. And so that's somewhere that I needed to channel this fuel. Things are happening.
This episode is Nathan Peck's story. Nathan is such an engaging and interesting guest. He's a dad, husband, son, and nephew, but also a patient advocate, CEO, and patient of Cure VCP Disease, a nonprofit organization dedicated to organizing the patient population and scientists and bringing them together to make progress on treating and curing VCP disease. In this episode, we start out with Nathan explaining some of the science behind VCP disease, including mutations of a specific gene, the valicin-containing protein gene, hence the name VCP disease. This disease can manifest in one or a combination of ways, including muscle degradation, early onset bone disease, frontal temporal dementia, and ALS. This particular disease is commonly misdiagnosed as limb-girdle muscular dystrophy, myositis, or other myopathies. It's a rare, adult-onset disease that definitely runs in the family. So we talk about Nathan's family being researched when he was growing up because of the prevalence of the disease in his family, the ethics of having children, the role of genetic testing, and the importance of getting your financial affairs in order before you get genetic testing. Then Nathan gets really personal, opening up about what it physically feels like to have VCP disease, the mental toll of having the disease, and channeling those emotions into finding answers. We talk about what the future looks like. For Nathan, it looks like everything from not being able to hold a pizza pan to being mindful of curbs when walking on the street, and the importance of human intervention in changing the future. It looks like grappling with losing independence. But it also looks like hope for others after Nathan, perhaps Nathan too. This episode not only educates you on a rare disease, but gives you an inside look at the thoughts, feelings, and efforts of a patient doing his best to advocate for himself and others. If you or someone you know is struggling with symptoms, including but not limited to abnormal muscle fatigue, bone pain, or memory issues, this episode is definitely worth a listen. Of course, this episode is worth a listen anyways because not only is it packed with resources and advice on being your own health advocate, but you'll be inspired by Nathan's passion, drive, energy, and business expertise to start doing whatever it is you've been putting off. You get perspective on tomorrow and the importance of taking opportunities that present in your life. You guys, I'm so excited about something that has been months in the making. In the next 2 weeks, I'll be opening an online course for beta testing. It's called Overcome It, Break Negative Cycles to Find Freedom from Your Past and Peace in Your Present. It's packed with 5 hours of instruction based on science, philosophy, and personal experience with strategies, tactics, and actionable advice. Beta testing involves taking the course before it's fully released to receive the benefits and results in exchange for honest feedback. If you or someone you know has trauma in your past and would like to participate as a beta tester, contact me, Brandy, at humanamplified.com/contact. Spots are limited, so act now.
My name is Nathan Peck, and I'm 44 years old. I live in South Georgia, and I am a patient and actually the CEO of a patient advocacy organization called Cure VCP disease. We started it in 2018. I'm actually a patient with the disease, and my mom is deceased. It's a hereditary genetic disease of the valicin-containing protein, which is the P97 gene. And so there's a mutation in that gene, and it's what we call autosomal dominant, meaning that if your parent was a carrier, you have a 50% chance of getting that mutated gene. And so my mom is deceased from the disease. I have an aunt deceased from the disease, and I have two uncles with the disease. And the symptoms of the disease, there's actually three different what we call phenotypes. I didn't know what that word was until we started the organization, but inclusion body myopathy, which is a muscle weakness, degradation of muscles. I'm still ambulatory at this time, and that's the phenotype that I have only
Okay.
right now. And that's just muscle weakness. I'm still ambulatory. I can walk, but in another couple of years, I won't be able to. My mom was unable to feed herself, bathe herself, really do anything. My dad had to do everything for her. So another phenotype of the disease is early onset Paget's disease of bone, which there are treatments for, but that's kind of brittle bones, bone pain. My mom actually had that along with the inclusion body myopathy. And I have another uncle that has both as well.
Okay.
And then frontal temporal dementia is the other main phenotype. And so there's a lot of discussion about FTD in the news because people are learning a lot more about that disease. And it's not necessarily a memory dementia. It's actually, you kind of get crazy behavior. Your behavior changes significantly. You can't talk. So ALS is also a phenotype, but a much smaller percentage of the patient population. But a patient can get 1, 2, 3, or all 4 of those phenotypes. So that's the disease in a nutshell.
Okay, so VCP disease is Valicin containing protein, and that's basically just the name of the disease, correct?
The valicin containing protein, there's a lot of research and science going on, to try to understand the VCP. There's actually clinical trials in the oncology, the cancer space around VCP right now. So it's a basic protein. About 1% of all your proteins in your body are VCP, which I don't know how technical you want to get, but, and again, I'm no scientist, but it basically unfolds damaged or bad proteins. That's what VCP does. It kind of monitors or facilitates the getting rid of. So imagine if you were in your house and you never threw away your trash.
Mm-hmm.
The trash would just continue to build up and build up. And that's essentially what's happening because with the mutated VCP gene, it's not facilitating this process correctly. So the trash just builds up in bad cells, just build up, and that's what causes a lot of the wasting. But science still doesn't understand why certain people get certain phenotypes or certain diseases. Why some people get the IBM, or some people get the FTD, some people get both. They don't understand why.
Right. Okay. And so, since you did go over a lot of technical stuff there very quickly, is it fair to break it down sort of in layman terms to be the three main phenotypes are muscle related, bone related, and mind related?
That's correct. Yeah. So you call that disparate phenotypes because and actually another name for the disease is a multi-system proteinopathy because it affects different systems in your body and they don't know why.
Okay. When you say they don't know why, who is they?
Science, the scientists, researchers, the scientific community.
All right. So you said you were a patient. When did you first realize you had VCP disease?
I actually was building an arcade system for myself. I had always wanted to build a video game machine. And so I was doing a lot of work on the floor with putting stuff together. And I noticed that when I would squat on the floor, I had trouble kind of getting back up. Like I had to give myself a little boost. And I thought that was kind of odd because I was very athletic. When you watch basketball games, you see coaches kind of squat on the floor to get in the defensive position. And, it was just something that I kind of noticed I was having issues with. I also was doing, the P90X workout program because, I'd gotten a little bit out of shape and I'm like, man, but I had such trouble recovering. I literally would get sick when I was trying to recover. And I'm like, man, I'm not this out of shape. It's not this bad. And so I think those were really kind of the first symptoms, or that's the first time I noticed that I was having some problems. And I'm like, well, either I'm getting old or, something's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Because my mom had the disease, I knew there was a chance that I might have it. But you just didn't want to think about those things. And at 30 something years old, you're like, man, it's not, I don't know. I don't know. But my mom was still living at the time, and I did not want to go get tested, while she was alive. So, and some other financial reasons, which I think we might talk about. So,
Yeah. Why didn't you want to get tested while your mom was alive?
well, I mean, I didn't want her to have the burden that she passed the disease on to me. I didn't know at the time, but these things it's hard. I think and that's why I'm doing what I'm doing today with Cure VCP disease, because I have three children. And, if they end
Yeah.
up having it, it's because I was responsible for passing that on to them. And, one of my uncles was, way back when we started kind of planning for children, was like, you should not have children. That's irresponsible if you do that. And it was like,
Oh, man.
man, you know what? Buzz off. It's not your business. But now I understand a little bit more where he's coming from, that, I certainly feel a big sense of responsibility, but that's why we're doing what we're doing today, because it's all about the next generation. Advocating and creating a cure or a therapeutic, that takes time. It takes a lot of time.
Hmm.
So, I don't have any misgivings that there's going to be a cure for me in my lifetime, but for my boys, there should be. Yes.
Okay. That's an interesting point you brought up that I hadn't thought through before. So thank you for sharing that. So you mentioned the financial reasons why you didn't want to get tested as well. When you say tested, are we referring to genetic testing?
Correct. Yeah. I mean, a big topic today, everybody, 23 and me, and, but these are more detailed kind of panels that test for specific gene mutations, where, some of the things you see, 23 and me or others, they're just kind of broad, right?
Hmm. Okay.
But yeah, this is a specific gene test to where, when you're filling out life insurance or disability insurance applications, you have to answer those questions truthfully about what you know. And so if you don't know, that's a good thing.
Okay. Definitely want to explore that further because that seems a little difficult to deal with. But did you actually go through genetic testing at some point?
So my family had been studied by doctors and researchers. And so I think blood was taken from, I remember back in high school before I went to college,
Hmm.
but I never found out the results. And they were de-identified. It was just known within a family, hey, here's what, if there were, again, that was science's purpose, you know, choice of what to do with that data, but I didn't want to know. And I'm glad I didn't find out at that time. But yes, we were studied at the time, but yeah, it was just a genetic test. I guess they were looking for certain things. I mean, that's how they ended up discovering, the VCP mutation. I think 2004 was when really that discovery was made, because different families that were studied that had similar phenotypes or expressions, we originally thought it was limb-girdle muscular dystrophy. This disease was limb-girdle muscular dystrophy, and it's not. It's the VCP mutation. So it's kind of a cross between a muscular dystrophy and ALS.
Okay. I would love for you to go a little more in detail about why you wouldn't have wanted to know the results of those tests you went through when you were younger.
I think you have to look at and weigh your kind of mentality and how you handle bad news. Now, it could be, if you didn't have the gene mutation, then it's great news, right? You can kind of go on, live your life, and it's stress free. But if you do have the mutation, even though you might be a strong mindset person or strong mentally, it messes with you. So, example, I mean, even when I found out, it wasn't a surprise to me that I had the gene mutation, because, again, the symptoms were kind of getting worse. I was feeling some things.
Mhm.
And we didn't tell anybody for 2 years. We told my father that that was it. We kept it quiet, my wife and I, when we say we. But it messed with it. I mean, it messes with me. Now, on the contrary, because I didn't know, I always had a clock in my head. So I made some decisions when it came to my professional career. always took promotions. Might not have been the right thing to do, or advancement opportunities. I always jumped at those because just something in the back of my head was, if I have this disease, I need to generate as much income as quickly as possible. So, for instance, I went to MIT for grad school at age 30. I had 2 children at the time. We sold our house, lived off the equity that we had in our house. Probably not the wisest financial decision,
Mhm.
but it was one of those things that, man, I'll never have another chance. I might not have another chance to do this
Mhm.
at this time. So my mindset was always, don't pass opportunities. And part of that was because of my parents. My parents had big plans for traveling the world. My mom had grown up overseas. My dad had never been anywhere overseas, but they had always wanted to travel together.
Mhm.
But once my mom started showing symptoms right when I was leaving for college, and her condition continued to worsen, those plans were put on hold, and it was really just about survival. And so, again, I always, yeah, I didn't want to pass up opportunities, and I didn't want to miss anything because I might not have that window.
Sure.
And I guess my thinking was right. Everybody has a bucket list or things they want to do. I mean, I've pretty much done, a lot of the things that I wanted to do. So I don't feel any regrets in that regard. So the mindset, everybody's different. Some people need to know. And as an advocacy organization, we just try to counsel that, hey, just make sure you have your financial matters in order before you go find out. But it will mess with you. It does mess with your head, but everybody's different. Again, that's that uniqueness of
Mhm.
being human and how people process that information.
Sure, sure. Definitely want to get into the financial aspect of things that you've sort of alluded to since we've started talking. Real quick though, what did you go to MIT for?
At the time, it was called Leaders for Manufacturing, but now it's called the Leaders for Global Operations program at MIT. So it's a dual degree. You go get a master's of engineering in a particular discipline. So I did a master's of civil and environmental engineering. And then you also do a master's of business administration, an MBA from MIT Sloan. And it's a 2-year program, about 50 people in the program, but it was really focused on global operations, manufacturing. A lot of people in the program had experience in manufacturing, and so it was a wonderful, wonderful program, wonderful opportunity. And actually, some of those learnings and the preparation have prepared us for cure VCP disease.
Yeah.
How to approach that, because I run, cure VCP disease as a business. It's really kind of entrepreneurial, and where are the things that we can kind of cobble things together, to be resourceful,
Mhm.
when we have limited resources. So, no, I think from my standpoint, I worked at Dell for 8 years, worked in defense, all the different career opportunities has all kind of come together for what cure VCP disease is. It's almost amazing how much everything's kind of aligned to
Mhm.
where it's made it a lot easier to kind of this is just problem solving. That it's all it is problem solving.
Yeah. Okay. And we will definitely talk more about Cure VCB Disease Inc. But now let's shift into that sort of financial elephant in the room and the problem that people who are coming down with symptoms of VCP disease have to sort of navigate. What are the financial implications once someone is genetically tested? And what happens once it goes into your medical record?
Yeah. So the other piece I forgot to mention, this disease is an adult onset disease. So
Okay.
you don't start showing symptoms. The research is late 30s, early 40s, but everybody's a little different. Some people don't show symptoms till their 50s. So what's different, in pediatric diseases, genetic testing has to be done, to understand what might be going on with your child, or even the parents need to get testing to see if there's something in common. But for our disease, because it doesn't express until kind of late 30s, early 40s, everything might be going well and life is good and nothing to worry about. But we were kind of blessed we were blessed in terms of just being thoughtful, because we had the information that my mom had a disease that could be hereditary. Other people don't have that blessing. We've got some patients that were adopted, so they had no, inkling that there was this hereditary issue that might happen. But yeah, so when we talk about, and certainly it's in the news today, pre-existing conditions. And so medical insurance right now, you can't be discriminated against because of pre-existing conditions. But that's not true for life insurance, for disability insurance, for any other kind of insurance that you might want to get. You can be discriminated against. And you need to fill out when you're applying for these things. And maybe if you're your young, early 20s or mid 20s, life insurance or disability insurance is not something you're thinking about. But, if you've had a genetic test done, you need to answer truthfully those questions. And so we just counsel, we need the data from people that haven't been genetically tested. So if you have family members that haven't been genetically tested with VCP disease, we need to know, we need that information. But at the same time, we have an ethical duty that we try to counsel people that, hey, make sure your life insurance, disability insurance, everything's good and you're comfortable with those levels. Because, even after I was diagnosed and it got into my medical record about my, condition, disease, I was denied, we tried to up our life insurance a little bit further and I was denied on that.
Okay.
Based on it being in my medical record. So I hope that makes sense. It's just really important to be thoughtful about genetic testing. Actually, when I had my genetic test done, I went to a LabCorp location, and I can, tell the story now. I bribed the LabCorp lady. I paid her $20 just to take my blood, because I had a kit. I had the kit to send off to the researcher, but I just needed somebody to draw my blood. And I just paid her $20. She took my blood, put it, and I sent it off. And that way it wasn't in my medical record.
Okay. Yeah. Because say if you don't have those things taken care of, your affairs in order, and then it goes in your medical record, you could end up not having any means to take care of yourself later.
That's right. We have I was talking to a patient a month ago. He's now kind of feeling some things. He went to a doctor to talk about his genetics or his family history genetically. That came into his medical record. And now he's trying to apply for insurance and he's having challenges with that because either they weren't going to rate him or offer him insurance, or he's going to have to wait 2.5 years to where there's no other conditions, and so it can't be used in the application, but in 2.5 years, there's no telling how far he may progress.
Right.
And he does more of a trade type activity, which is a little more physical. And so, at this point, that person really can't climb ladders and do other things. And so, yeah, it's a challenge. So that's why we're really trying to just educate, genetic testing. It's very important. It's a very important topic, but we just need to be thoughtful about it, because I don't think, I talked at a genetics conference last year, and a lot of geneticists came up to me, wow, thank you. I didn't even think about that, because everybody just wants the data, which the data is super important, but
it has real life ramifications.
It has real life ramifications that could set you back forever, and so again, it's just really important to be thoughtful about it.
Yeah. So does this mean our healthcare system is bad?
I'm not even sure it's a reflection of the healthcare system. I think it's, I try to put myself into other shoes. If I was an insurance company and I knew that this person, if I knew Nathan was going to be, disabled or incapable of working the rest of his life, I might not insure him, So I think it's a very prudent business decision. And how would I alleviate that or change that? I don't know. I've actually really never thought about it. I'm just thankful that we are taken care of.
Yeah.
Because we, back when I was still healthy and good, I don't think we talked about this, but I bought a a premium long-term disability insurance policy. And so we paid, it was very expensive, but, and one of my uncles, one of my uncles was the motivation for this. He had been a teacher and had bought a long-term disability policy, and he ended up cashing it in. He got kind of a lump sum. And I asked him for years, I'm like, hey, where'd you get that? Who do I talk to? What do we do? And finally, I was leading a company, and the wealth management people came in, and I just I didn't share too much with them, but I said, I'm interested in a long-term disability. Oh, okay. Yeah, we got that. We can do that. And so, the benefits of that were, as my income grew, the policy grew. If I changed companies, that policy went with me wherever I went because it was a personal policy. It wasn't a work employment policy. It also tracked inflation. So as inflation went up, I could increase the income or the benefit on it without having to get a physical. So, but we paid heavily for it, but now we don't have to worry about anything. So,
Okay. All right. Let's shift. You've talked a little bit about what your adult life has been like career-wise. Can you give us a little more of a picture into what your life was like before you started exhibiting symptoms in terms of family, just how you lived your life and things like that?
sure. Yeah. So, I was very active. Always been, I was one of those people that probably worked too much. So I was wanted to be the first one in the office, last one to leave the office. Leadership was very important to me. Family wise, I coached my oldest, who's 16 now. I coached all his teams, participated in Cub Scouts, as a Cub Scout leader with him. So just very involved and very engaged. Probably had a problem saying no to stuff, but once I started feeling things, I can't be as active as I want. I was a big basketball player, loved playing volleyball after work. It was just, but now I can't. My shoulders are so weak, I can't get the ball up to the rim, and so that's the most hurtful part. Is my son just had a soccer game yesterday, and man, how awesome it would be to be out there and kick the ball with him, and
Mm.
but I need a cane to stand up straight. And if I fall, I'm in which I've fallen several times, I'm in a world of hurt. And, I still need to be able to, independence is very important
Mhm.
to me, being able to travel, for work. I traveled a lot. And, when I started having some more issues, I fell in the airport, and I was about to get on the plane, and my knee was it was the worst. And so really that independence, that's the most fearful thing for me. Is I'm fiercely independent, and losing my independence is no, that sucks.
Yeah,
It just flat
yeah,
out sucks. So,
yeah.
I'll just, being at home a lot, because I am retired, on disability, but I'll just get in the car and just go drive because I want to enjoy my independence while I can, because I know at some point, having seen my mom and what she went through, having seen my uncles, they've gone through, that's where I do know what the future looks like, and I don't like it. Quality of life is really important to me. So that's a challenge. Mhm.
What does the future look like?
Well, the future is you continue to lose mobility. Getting getting off the toilet is a challenge. So it's going to be what accommodations do you put in place to, do you get a toilet lift seat? Things that kind of get you off the toilet. Certainly using a cane. I have a scooter that I use to, if I need to walk long distances or going down hills or other things. Going to a
Mhm.
conference. I use the scooter. So I've kind of gotten over that. From it hurts your pride a lot, but yeah. So the future is I almost dropped a pizza pan. That thing weighs nothing, but gravity is working against me at this point. So I won't be able to feed myself. It's just respiratory failure. That's what you're looking at. But how fast does that happen? That's what you don't know. And that's actually, as an organization, what we're trying to measure
Okay.
is what that rate of degradation, looks like. So that, if there was a clinical trial or there was a drug, you actually know it's working, because you need to understand what that rate of degradation is.
Gotcha. So when you fell at the airport, were you able to get back up yourself or did people help you? How did that go?
Yeah, at that time, I was able to, you kind of do a push up and lift yourself up, but I'd spilled a Coke all over the floor at the Atlanta airport. And, so that stunk. But now if I fall, I would not be able to really push myself up. I need to find a chair or something kind of low where I can kind of shimmy my way up and boost myself up. Otherwise, if I was somewhere in the middle of a field and I
Mhm.
fell, that would not be good. I'd be crawling. I can still crawl, but a lot of our patients can't even do that. I mean, that's how debilitating this is your muscles just won't work. My mom, probably the last 2, 3 years of her life, she couldn't even drive her scooter with her thumb or her wheelchair with her thumb. So a motorized wheelchair. And so, there's lots of people that are disabled that have those issues. But, it's just, I think it's hard when you're used to this independence and you've had it, and then you're losing it all. You know,
Mhm.
so
Yeah. What are some of the normal things that people don't think about that you have to think about regularly in terms of mobility or independence or anything like that? I know you mentioned before this interview about taking flights of stairs or what you have to think about when you're
yeah,
walking toward a curb,
yeah,
things like
yeah.
that.
Curbs are brutal. I mean, curbs are where you could fall down because really my quadriceps are some of the first muscle, ankle, quadriceps, shoulders. For most patients, that's what kind of goes. And so you really recognize the importance of different muscles in your body. So, yeah, stepping up a curb, it's a lot of quad. And so, if I don't have something to grasp or hold on to or to kind of push off of, I would not take a curb by myself. And so, those ramps that you see, the handicap ramps, those are very appealing. They're very useful, and I'm thankful for the Disability Act that, kind of mandated that. But even at my children's school, they have handicap parking, but it's all curb. There is no ramp. I'd have to go park somewhere else to be able to get into one of the buildings. And we've not made a big stink about it, but it's something that most people don't even recognize or realize is that, you can have handicap parking, but you really need a ramp to get up to, because there's a reason, for some of us that, stairs, if I can't grab onto something, it's really a lot of arms that I'm using to pull myself up the stairs because, again, my quads are so, and likewise going downstairs, you're holding on just for dear life to make sure you don't fall and roll down the stairs. So, yeah, you definitely recognize the importance of certain muscles. Even now, I mean, cabinets, you know, trying to put stuff up high cabinets. I mean, I'm and that's the first symptom my mom had. I mean, and was reaching up, and so
Mm.
that's becoming more of a challenge now. And so it's with exercise and stretching, those help. But just as soon as you stretch, I mean, you're just tight again. So even walking. I mean, walking, I definitely focus and concentrate on walking, and I walk hyperextended to prevent because my muscles are weaker. I don't want to fall. So
Mhm.
even touching things, when I'm walking, just kind of provides that stability. Versus if you're in a dark room and you can't see where you're going, it can be scary. So,
Yeah. Yeah. So you said everything feels tight. Are there any other sensations that you get that you did not get before this came on?
yeah, it's just weakness. I mean, it's just weakness. It's really, if anybody's done the Mudder run or something like that, I mean, that's what it feels like for me is I'm just walking through mud. It's just, it's hard to move. You have to
Okay.
be very deliberate, in moving. And then, like, I think the more this goes, I remember my mom talking about your arms asleep. the sensation. So it's just like that sensation, like when your hand's asleep or your arm,
Hmm.
you shake it out, but you're not going to be able to do that. That's not how I feel now, but it's just the slowness and just weakness. I mean, literally, I was pulling a pizza on a pan out of the oven, and I felt, it was just a certain position that I was in. I almost dropped it because my muscles just gave way. I mean, it really is gravity working against you. So,
Okay. Okay. Well, so we've talked a lot about the physical changes. Now let's talk a little bit about your mind and your emotions. And so when you realized that life was going to change in a big way, how did you deal with that realization? And also, how did it impact your spirituality?
yeah. So in the beginning, it's really scary. And we kind of see patients kind of go through these different phases. And it's probably no different than for a lot of other diseases as well. Is you're thinking every day, is this my last day that I'm going to be able to stand up, getting out of bed? And it's really fearful. And maybe a little bit of panic ensues. I mean, it's just scary. It's like when it's harder to get off the toilet, it's like, man, am I going to get stuck? And then as you kind of see the sky's not, that everything hasn't ended suddenly, and again, it's a slow degradation.
Mhm.
Then you kind of get a little, I won't say peace with it, but you get more comfortable or used to it, conditioned to it. And so it's just kind of, and that's where you start to get more comfortable with using assistive devices. The scooter, it was like, man, I want to go to Universal Studios with my kids. So I'm going to use this scooter. I mean, it's just, there's no ifs, ands, or buts. I want to travel. I want to continue to travel. This scooter is a big thing that enables that. So I think in your mind, you just get more kind of comfortable with it. But from my standpoint, certainly a lot of anger. Now I do feel like, look, if somebody's going to get the disease, I'd rather get it than my sister.
Mhm.
I'd rather get it than my wife. Which my wife would not have a disposition for, but I'd rather be the one. I can take the burden. But that anger certainly has been channeled. I'm also a doer, and so I believe you got to do something and recognize that the patient population was not organized, the scientific community was not really organized, and so that's somewhere that I needed to channel this fuel or this anger, towards that. Yeah, spirituality wise, I want to be careful how I say this, but if I fall on the floor, God's not picking me up. He's just not getting me up. I'm going to have to get up, and I'm going to have to, be the one that, whether it's assistive devices or a human being asking for help, in our disease, nothing had been done. I mean, there was research going on, but it wasn't until human intervention and people getting together to bring, we have a lot of personalities in our scientific population. Some of them don't
Mhm.
get along, don't like each other. And it's our human intervention that is bringing that together. Otherwise, if we didn't do anything, we wouldn't have advanced as much as we have in the past 2 years. And so, I just, yeah, it's changed my mindset that, I've got to do what I can control right now.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of people hide behind, oh, we'll pray for you or we'll pray about this. Well, that's not going to fix it. It's really, human intervention and people getting on the phone and calling other people or calling doctors or researchers. That's what's going to move things forward. So yeah, I try not to talk too much about it because I think everybody's, again, that uniqueness,
Mhm.
people's spirituality is what helps motivate them or keep them going. And that's important. For me, it's not now at this
Okay.
point. And so, because ultimately, I think I know where this is going, unless we are able to motivate, unless there's a breakthrough. But again, miracles are supernatural events. And I think, we have to be humans that kind of motivate this forward and encourage it and drive it forward. So,
Mhm. Sure. Sure. So you said that you have channeled a lot of that anger and energy toward finding solutions. So, would you say that's why you started Cure VCP disease?
Absolutely. Well, my family was studied by the research community. I mean, there were certain researchers working on it, but when you have to fill out the same disclosure statement or information about yourself 3 times because it gets lost, that's a little frustrating. And this is the beautiful thing about the internet and our times that we're at with genetic testing and the advances in science is you see the patients starting to, well, not starting, they have been because of people they are influencing, and the scientific community says they want it, the FDA says they want it, the NIH says they want it, that they want the patient involved. And so, nobody's going to look after your disease or address it unless it's you driving that agenda. A lot of our scientists and researchers, they're studying lots of different neuromuscular diseases. But my job is to make sure VCP disease, IBM-PFD, which is another name for the disease, is number one. We're not going to let a moment pass by where we're not working on something and staying in front of them. And you know what? They appreciate that. We've spent a lot of time in the beginning. It wasn't about fundraising for our disease. It was about building credibility.
Okay.
It was about building trust with these scientists and researchers. I mean, what we really started doing was we built a brochure to be able to hand out to articulate about the disease, but we also started networking with the scientists and letting them know that we existed. And, one of our, medical advisory board members, a scientist, who I consider a good friend now. I mean, we met him for the first time. We had talked over the phone, but we met him at the American Neurology Association conference. And we actually invited him. It just turned out that there was an Atlanta Falcons football game, on Monday night. And we invited him to the football game just to get to know him better.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't tell you how important that was for the life of our organization because he understands that we're not looking for something from him. We're here to support. We're here to support all the doctors. I make that very clear when I talk to these scientists and researchers is, look, I'm not looking for anything from you. How can I help you? How can our organization help you? And the way we're doing that is by identifying patients, organizing our patients, putting on conferences, talking to the FDA, doing those things that makes their job easier.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, I was definitely going to ask you where you guys started. So, how has Cure VCP disease evolved from those beginning stages to now? And what initiatives do you currently have going?
Yeah. So we started because there was a potential of a clinical trial within, one of the researchers, doctors, had a drug that was being offered to her. And so, we needed to raise money. And we had a dear friend whose children, have a rare disease that had advised us, do not give that money to the academic institution. Do not do it. You need to start a patient advocacy organization. And we were like, what? What is a patient advocacy organization? Never heard of it, And she's like, don't do it. Don't do it. And you know what? She was 100% right. Because we raised that money. Again, it wasn't the researcher, there were a lot of other factors at play. And that's the thing. This is very complex. But that money, we raised a good bit for them. And I don't know what's really ever happened to it. It's not important at this point.
Mm-hmm.
What was important was our friend was absolutely correct in that we need to start an advocacy organization that we could kind of help drive some of these activities. And if we wanted to fund research, we could fund research. If we wanted to fund patient support, we could fund patient support. If we wanted to fund a natural history study, which is what we're working on right now, then that's what we could do. And so we can kind of drive the agenda. And she was absolutely right. And so, but the first thing was patient identification. And so the way we did that was with creating a patient registry where our patients could go in and put in their information. And because we get asked all the time, what's the prevalence of this disease? We don't know what the prevalence of the disease is because so many people get misdiagnosed or doctors or researchers don't know about the disease. And so, but creating that patient registry, we did that in about 5 months. When I would go talk to different companies, drug companies or whatever, they would light up when they hear that there's a patient registry. So, that was the most important activity. Then we did a patient conference.
Okay.
A little over a year after we started, we had our first patient conference at Washington University in St. Louis. And we had probably the largest gathering of VCP disease patients in one spot. So it's just these little wins and a lot of listening, understanding that credibility is the most important thing.
Okay.
Because we actually find, I got a call last week, a scientist calling us asking for our help, to help his research. It's not us calling him, it's now people are coming to us because that credibility has been established.
Okay. Well, and what is the natural history study that you mentioned?
Yeah, so it's really, I was actually on a panel for a Global Genes conference about this, but natural history study can mean a lot of different things to people. But from our approach, it's understanding the disease in patients across a broad set. And it's understanding, more importantly, for us, what is that rate of degradation of the disease? And so it's collecting, it can be collecting biosamples, blood, to be able to analyze that. That's one facet of it. It's looking at people's medical records, to understand, what commonality there might be in people's medical records. It's understanding functionally how people perform, at point A, or time zero, how do you perform? At time one, how do you perform? At time two, how do you perform? So it's just pulling all that information together, and it's never been done in our disease. And so therefore, again, if you had a clinical trial or a drug, intervention event, how do you know it's working? You can't just go off of, yeah, I feel better. That's one facet of it. But, can you actually measure, that there's, that it's slow, and that's the encouraging news in ALS, with a particular drug is they slowed the rate of progression, of the disease. And these are things that we've learned. If you talked to me 2 years ago, Brandy, I wouldn't have known any of that. I didn't know what I was talking about. So these are the things that you just learn, in the advocacy space.
Yeah. And it sounds like you guys have sort of, well, like you said, learning as you go, but methodically working your way through these building blocks. Like you keep building on the information you have before to eventually lead to answers, I guess. Is that an accurate?
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, we could have taken money and we would have invested, you hear everybody, oh, you need cell lines and animal models. Well, we could have done that 3, 4 months in. The problem was we would have been wasting our money because we've now identified, because we're networking and talking to researchers and scientists, that they have a lot of these models. We don't need to go, they're interested in the same things. And so we would have wasted.
Like, don't reinvent the wheel.
That's right. That's right. But some of that just takes time and understanding. And trust me, if there's a more impatient person than myself, bring them on, because time is not my friend. I mean, time and gravity are the two forces working against, me. So, and our patience. And so there is because, there's things that you can't do, but we've established a scientific focus group. We were going to conduct the first ever VCP scientific conference in North America, back in September at Caltech, and we had to cancel due to COVID. But what we did in place was create a focus group where we bring 10 to 11, 15, 20 of the top VCP scientists and researchers together on a monthly phone call. And what we're finding is we started with 10, and now it's ballooning, to 18 to 20 because people want to be involved. And we're learning more about the research that they're doing, but also trying to bring them together. Mm-hmm. A lot of them cite each other's work and research, but they've never met in person. And that's unacceptable. I mean, we can be a conduit to facilitating and bringing everybody together.
Yeah.
The research probably isn't as important to fund right now. I mean, there might be some initiatives, but there's a lot of money out there studying it. But our role is to bring everybody together and make sure they're talking.
That makes a lot of sense. And it's really awesome what you're doing, by the way, which I'm sure you know. But I do I do have one more question for you about your study on the rate of degradation of just we talked about this a little bit, but just for our listeners' sake, how far into that are you and what do you know about that so far?
Yeah, so we're trying some different things. Certainly, COVID has been disruptive. So we had some researchers that were going to try to do a big NIH funded. We create centers of excellence across the world where patients can go. And because things aren't happening, they can't happen. I mean, a lot of patients can't, the respiratory part of COVID would be very just, terrible to a lot of our patients, myself included.
Mm-hmm.
And so traveling and going places is not an opportunity. And so the advent of telemedicine, telehealth is a big opportunity for us. And so what we have done, we've already started, and actually we had a meeting with the FDA yesterday just to share with them what we learned. We created a phase 1 pilot, a proof of concept, where using Zoom, and again, this doesn't seem like rocket science, but it's innovative, is we have our patients get on Zoom and we have a principal investigator from an institution, walk them through different activities. But what we did was we built kits with all the equipment the person would need. So they don't need to go find quarters or pencils or a dynamometer. I mean, we built this thing for them. So they have this kit. So everything's standardized. And so the researcher did everything via Zoom, took about an hour and a half. We even bought little step-up steps, because for some people that are ambulatory that might be able to step up, the researcher can see that and measure that and score it. And so that the proof of concept was just to see what issues there might be. And so we learned some great things through that. Phase 2 is we're going to try to get people to one clinic in the US, do the clinical the same measures, but then within a 2 to 4 week time period, do the same measures remotely. Then at 6 months, do them remotely. And then at 12 months, they go back to the clinic and do it remotely. And the reason, I'd love to be able to just do it all remote, not have to worry about going to the clinic. But it is very important to validate that there is statistically no difference between in the clinic versus at home.
That makes sense.
And that's more, the politics of working with the FDA, working with the scientific community, because people are going to try to poke holes that, well, this isn't representative, even for the drug company's sake, that if they're doing a clinical trial, that they feel comfortable, with this data, but also to learn about, the learning through this will help us in terms of how, when that day comes for a clinical trial, how can we execute this? So,
yeah,
we're that phase 2 will expand to 20 patients. Cure VCP disease is actually going to fund that work. We're not relying on others for it. And so now we have an objective for fundraising, to go drive those activities. We're also doing, one other thing to talk about real quick is we bought 100 dynamometers. That's for hand grip strength, to measure your hand grip. And so I went on Alibaba and we imported in 100 of these, dynamometers. And our goal is to give them to the patient population, our patients, so that every 2 weeks they can measure their grip strength.
Mm-hmm.
And that might be an indicator of, again, their rate of degradation, on the disease as their grip strength kind of goes away. And so we've, again, learned, we're doing that through a Google form and a Google sheet. But if we ever want to publish on that data, we need to have an IRB in place. And so that's something that we're learning about. We're still trying to find whether we do an academic institution or do it ourselves. But again, there's just creative, kind of innovative ways to go measure.
What's an IRB?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, that internal review board. So it's a third party that reviews kind of a scientific project to make sure that it's scientifically valid. But again, I'm probably butchering the definition of this thing. But if you ever want to publish in a scientific journal, you need to have had an IRB approved study. So I'll leave it at that. It's a prerequisite to Nathan could go, Cure VCP disease could go run our own study. But if we ever wanted to publish in some academic journal,
mm-hmm.
we wouldn't be able to because we didn't have an IRB approved study. So ultimately, we really want to to publish on it.
Do you have a time frame for when you think you'll have enough data to say what the rate of degradation is?
So it's a great question, actually. We don't know. We don't know. One of our scientists said, man, I hope in 12 months we might be able to see a difference. I can tell you that in 12 months, I've degraded, especially because of COVID and being at home more and not being as active, certain skills, have degraded. But again, how do you quantify that? So our hope would be to begin in 2021 with this clinical remote study.
Mhm.
I think COVID, again, because we have to start people in the clinic as well. COVID's going to be a factor in that. But I would hope by the beginning of 2020 or Q1 of 2022, we've kind of answered or we have a better idea. Certainly, our hope is with what we're setting up, it's all about momentum. So we get this study started. If we're able to get more funding for it from other sources, then great. Otherwise, we'll try to keep funding it, to keep going, to bring on
Mhm.
even more patients, because that data is going to be important because maybe there is an endpoint or a biomarker that comes along in that time.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm definitely going to follow you and see how this goes. And it's just awesome the work you're
Well,
doing.
I appreciate that. And I appreciate your support in terms of, again, a lot of this is marketing, educating, awareness.
Hmm.
And so this forum is certainly a great way to do that as well. One other thing, I know we probably have to wrap up, but I learned a valuable lesson talking about publication.
Hmm.
Over one of our researchers during COVID, his lab was shut down. He didn't know what to do with his postdoc students, a lot of, the PhD students. And so he's like, why don't we publish a paper on your patient registry? Okay, sounds great. Sounds good. Let's see what comes out of it.
Uh-huh.
So that paper came out at the end of September in the Orphanet Journal of Rare Diseases. And I can't, coming back to the credibility thing, I can't tell you how important it was. What a lesson it was because I could email scientists or researchers or people that might not, who the Cure VCP folks, they're just, get out of, we don't want to deal with them. But we say
Hmm.
that we published this paper and we had people coming to us because they're like, oh, I saw this paper. It actually just gave, again, more credibility to what we're doing and to the disease itself.
Hmm.
And so that's why, for me, maybe I was the dunce in the room, but actually publishing, having a real publication about our organization and the work that it's doing was really important, extremely valuable.
Yeah. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. For sure.
So
So, what advice do you have, just taking all of your life lessons and experience in? What advice or wisdom would you give to others now that you know what you know?
I think no fear. Um, none of us know. I don't know anything about the science of the disease. I mean, I know very little. Have we gotten smarter about it? Absolutely. Do we listen well? Yes. And there is no formula for how to do this. Everybody's diseases are a little different. Your challenges in terms of the scientific community are different. Your patient population challenges are different. And so, really learning from others what they've done, best practices, little nuggets that you can get from others. But there is no formula for this, there is no prescription. So, everybody kind of has to weave your own journey in terms of how you go about this, based on, again, you have to be very dynamic in terms of what you do, not being scared of it. You know, even within our patient population, a lot of people don't understand. We don't know what we're doing, but we're doing something, and things are happening and momentum's being built, but we weren't scared. I send out newsletters, we do social media, we've taught ourselves how to do all this stuff, calling on scientists, researchers, you know, bringing them together. I'm not real comfortable doing that because I don't have the academic background for it, but it doesn't matter. They appreciate it and things are happening and getting done. So it's really the no fear. If you make a mistake, look, we got a disease. We're going to suffer as you can't make a big mistake. So,
Mhm.
one of the big things is important, paralysis of analysis. You can't analyze, to me, inactivity is the bigger sin. Not
Mhm.
doing something is worse than making a mistake, because that's how you're going to learn. And that's just the same as a professional career. It's no different. No different.
Mhm. Okay. Well, where can people find Cure VCP disease and all of your social media? Where can they follow you? Things like that.
Yeah. So on Facebook, we're at Cure VCP disease. If you just do at Cure VCP disease, or just type it in the search bar. We're on LinkedIn. We have a small presence on LinkedIn. Twitter, we're on Twitter, again, at Cure VCP disease. We do on our webpage, which is www.curevcp.org. You can subscribe to our newsletter. We send out a lot of, just within the rare disease space. Global Genes, we're a Foundation Alliance member. We found there. NORD, the National Organization of Rare Disorders, we can be found there. Our registry, all the links are on our webpage. So we'd love to connect with anybody that is interested in learning more.
Okay, well, all of those links will be in the show notes. So you guys make sure you go over there and get those and check it out. And Nathan, thanks so much for coming on the show. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Brandy, I appreciate all that you're doing. And yeah, the pleasure was mine. I appreciate the opportunity.
Subscribe on your favorite podcast platform and learn more at humanamplified.com.